The Autopsy of Jane Doe. I've been wanting to do this for a while. So we start with the sheriff by the name of Burke. He ends up going in his house, right? This house belonged to this couple by the name of Pete and Carol. He goes into his house as a bloodbath. It's just bodies, bodies, bodies everywhere. All these bodies are recognized until they go downstairs in the basement. There's one particular body that was halfway buried in the dirt, but nobody knows who it is, what it is. They can't get no fingerprints, no IDs or nothing, you know what I'm saying? She's just laying there. All this is taking place somewhere in Virginia. Now we check in on a spot called Tilden's Cremation and Funeral Parlor. We got this father and son that works there. The son is named Austin, the father's name's Tommy. And yes, their last names are Tilden, so it's a family business. So they're working on this one dude by the name Mr. Hanson. Now, at first you think this guy was burnt in a fire, but then Tommy explains, like, check the head or whatever like that. Now, the thing is, they think that the cause of death, he hit his head first before catching on fire. Austin's pretty smart, but Tommy's real good at his work. So they pretty much wrap that up. Then all of a sudden, Stanley pops out of nowhere. Stanley is their cat. The cat be hiding in the vents sometimes, but basically it goes in there and gets out rats. So as they finishing up, Emma pops up. Emma is Austin's little girlfriend. They're supposed to be going on a date, going to the movies or something like that. But she popped up at his job and actually wants to see some of the bodies. He's like, yeah, you don't want to do that. But then Tommy's like, yeah, you can let her see a couple of the bodies. He pulls out one body, his girl's face is all stitched up and shit. Then they pull out another body where the whole body's covered up. But you can see through the cover, there's a hole there and there where his face used to be. She wants to look at it. Austin tries to stop her, but before she even pulls out the cover, all of a sudden she has a little bell. She gets freaked out by the bell. Now, Tommy explains they tie bells around all the dead people's toes or whatever like that, and then he explains why. Just in case somebody's not fully dead, or if they come, you know, saying get rigor mortis or whatever. It was an old school thing to do, but he still keeps tradition going. So at this point, Tommy's about to clean up. Austin and Emma are ready to go to the movies. And all of a sudden, Sheriff Burke shows up, and he shows up with the Jane Doe. Now, the thing is, because she has no fingerprints or no clues or whatever, he can't explain nothing about who this person's supposed to be. And because he doesn't want a fiasco, he needs whatever they could get done by the morning. And Austin doesn't want to leave his father alone to do his particular task, so Austin tells Emma to come back around 11. He should be done by then. Now, the thing is, he really doesn't want to leave his father alone because apparently they lost their mother at like 2 years ago. But what exactly, I'm still not sure. So Emma dips out, and then Austin stays to work on this Jane Doe. Here's where the shit gets crazy. Now, the outside of her, she looks pretty clean. They open her eyes, and her eyes are gray. Now, they're checking her body, and they realize that her ankles and her wrists are completely broken. But once again, like I said, the outside of her body looks completely fine. Then the radio starts playing out of nowhere. The Sunshine song comes on and just interrupts, right? So you're thinking to yourself, all right, it's just the radio. Then they check her mouth and see that her tongue has been bit off. But the thing is, it wasn't bit off. It was cut off. But by who? Austin takes a blood sample, puts the lid on it tight, and then puts it in the refrigerator. Then they go on the inside of her body. They see her heart's like blackened. Ribs got like burnt scars on them. It's like weird scars tissue, like somebody was cutting her from the inside. But how's that possible if the outside looks pretty normal? Then they're digging through her nails and she's got something called peat on there. It's like a harder dirt substance or whatever like that. But Tommy's saying this type of dirt substance comes from up north. So they think to themselves, what the fuck is she doing in Virginia? The crazy thing is before they cut her body open, blood just started leaking down and all the way down to this like little section. You're thinking to yourself, that's not supposed to happen. So my question is, how long was she buried in the fucking basement? Because if it was for a certain time frame, blood wouldn't leak out like that. Then this part, Austin was looking at her nose bled a little bit and a fucking fly came out of her nose. It flew into one of those blue lights and killed itself. So with all the type of markings and things that they found on her, the inside of body parts or whatever like that, he's thinking to himself, like, somebody get tortured like this, they would be distorted, disconfigured, and discombobulated or whatever like that. But as we saw, the body was just regular and normal on the outside looking in. So you're thinking to yourself, this is damn near impossible to achieve. Tommy asks Austin to go get some clamps, right? When he goes back over to the fridge, he sees this blood leaking out the fridge. So he opens the fridge. All this blood's been leaking out or whatever like that from the vial that they got that he had took a sample of. And you're thinking to yourself, that's impossible because he closed the lid tight as fuck. So then Austin at this point thought he heard something at the door. So he goes around checking stuff, right? And then he looks through this mirror or whatever. Looks like something's walking towards him in the mirror, but when he turns around, there's nothing there. We're like, fam. And then Austin ends up going into another office and he keeps hearing stuff through the vent. And something scared the shit out of him. But then Tommy was like, yo, you all right? Turns out he found his cat Stanley in the vents and he was all fucked up. To the point where he couldn't even move. Tommy's holding the cat and then he looks up at Austin and then just snaps his neck, yo. Tommy ends up putting him in a hot box, closes the door, turns the flames up on it. So you're probably thinking to yourselves, how did this cat get fucked up this bad in the damn vents? All he does is hunt for rats. As it's going down, a storm is breaking out or whatever like that. And you go through the storm and you hear the cue on the radio or whatever like that. Then all of a sudden it starts playing that Sunshine song again. We're like, what the fuck? So before all this was happening, it was showing that it was 9:45 on the clock, right? A lot of stuff went on during this time. They show us the clock again. It's still sitting at 9:45. So now they go back to working on the body. This time they're digging around the intestines and the stomach or whatever. Man, he goes through the intestines and ends up pulling out a flower. Tommy's been around for a while, so he's done a lot of work on all different types of people, whatever, so he thinks his flower looks familiar. He looked it up in a book, turns out it's some type of ginseng weed. It's basically a paralyzed and poisonous flower. But why would this be inside of her intestines and even that be somewhat recognizable? Then they dig through her stomach again, and she's got like some type of insignia in there wrapped around a tooth. Austin takes the tooth, measures it to his face, turns out it's actually her tooth that was pulled out. That insignia's got like letters and Roman numerals on it. Now we're thinking to ourselves, how did this insignia with all these markings survive, I don't know, maybe stomach acid and not burning it the fuck up? At this point, Austin's still scared to even keep working on this shit, but Tommy's like, yeah, we gotta finish our job. So Austin's like, yeah, you're right. This is where shit hits the fan. They cut off a couple of layers of her skin, and when they pull it back, her skin has all the insignias and Roman numerals all across that shit on the inside. I'm like, what the fuck are we looking at? Next thing you know, lights start flickering, them shits black out, bulbs exploding and shit. Now keep in mind, the outside is like thunderstorming like crazy. So at this point, they get the fuck out the room and go into another room inside on the floor or whatever. I think it's like Tommy's personal office or whatnot. So they're basically trying to figure out what the fuck just happened. All of a sudden, they're trying to figure this out. Next thing you know, you just hear bells. You're like, bing, bing, bing. I'm like, oh shit. Austin looks on the door, sees nothing, and all of a sudden a foot goes across there. We're like, fuck this. They barricade the doors as Jane Doe's trying to get in, and all of a sudden it just stops. Then we see Tommy holding his wrist hurting or whatever like that. Oh, I forgot to tell this part. There was a certain point where Tommy was working on the Jane Doe body, he accidentally cut his wrist. Maybe his good blood got on the body, something happened, who knows. So at this point he's in the bathroom, he's trying to clean off his wrist or whatever like that. And he feels this gust of wind coming from the other part of the bathroom, so he goes over, he's about to look, right? As Austin turns around, it looks like somebody's in the bathtub, but when he pulls the curtain over, there's nobody there. Then all of a sudden, Tommy turns around, he sees gray eyes, and then the door shuts, locking Austin out, and whatever this is choking the hell out of Tommy, beating the shit out of him. And then it disappears as Austin kicks the door down. Tommy's laid out all fucked up. Austin's able to get him up and patch him up. So at this point, they're trying to find ways to escape. Now the thing is, when the light bulbs and everything busted or whatever like that, we found out half of the power went out. The elevator's not running as smooth. They try to get the elevator to work. It ain't working. Then they try to open this door up. So you got to understand, they're on the basement floor level of this establishment. They get to the steps. They try to open the big door to get out, but they can't open the door because a tree fell in front of the door. So at this point, they're pretty much stuck. So realizing this, they go back in the room where the Jane Doe is. Now I'm thinking to myself, the Jane Doe just laid back on the ground, back in the company, after it was chasing them or whatever like that. And you think to yourself, was there another body chasing them? What the fuck was happening? So they go back in the room and they're trying to figure out what the fuck could be causing all this, right? So at this point, they're thinking to themselves, they're going to relocate us to another part of the room or another room. But then the door closes, locking them both in. So it gets to the point where Austin's like, you know what? Fuck this. He starts chopping at the door with his axe, right? All of a sudden, he starts hearing bells again. We're like, where the fuck are the bells coming from now? The Jane Doe is laying on the daggone corner table. Looks to the hole of the door that he was chopping through, and all of a sudden, the dead person with the face all knitted up shows up. We're like, what the fuck? How did they get out there? Is the Jane Doe controlling all this shit? So Austin obviously thinking the Jane Doe's a problem, so he's really like, fuck this. They end up getting, he has to throw some lighter fluid, some gasoline or whatever like that, and puts a match, and then burns the damn Jane Doe. The thing is, the flames go up, and it goes up and around the whole room. We're like, all right, we got to put this shit out. I'm thinking to myself, y'all trapped in this room and you're going to light this bitch on fire. I guess that's why he just said, fuck it. They spray the fire extinguisher and they get all the fire out the room. But the crazy thing is, Jane Doe's body is completely clean. No scars, nothing. We're like, what the fuck? So at this point, I guess the door was weakened enough to the point that some way they was able to get out that room. They tried calling Sheriff Burke, but pretty much the phone lines were dead. Then they got to the point they kept toggling with the elevator, escalator or whatever, so they almost got a chance to be able to get inside. In the background, you see one of the coroner bodies creeping up. You're like, oh shit. Tommy's just standing there with the axe like, fuck it, if he's going to go, he's going to go. Meanwhile, Austin's still trying to get the door open. They're getting there, they're trying to close the elevator, but to no luck, right? Tommy sees the dead body coming at him. Austin says, fuck it, I can't leave that to you. He takes the axe from him, and then all of a sudden you see the dead body is the one that was actually covered up. The one that got the shotgun to his face, the one that Emma wasn't trying to look at or whatever. You see his face for a brief second, and that's when Austin swipes at it and knocking it out, right? Turns out when the lights come up, it was not the dead body. It was actually Emma. I'm like, what the fuck? Austin killed his girlfriend by accident, yo. Now, here's my question. How the fuck did she even get back in? The door exit was blocked off by the tree. They can't get up the daggone elevator. She would have had to come through the front door, go down the elevator to be able to get to that basement. So once again, how the hell did she even get down there? And if she did, why was she creeping around all of a sudden? Why she ain't say nothing? Was she possessed by the Jane Doe by the time she got down there? But then I'm thinking to myself, the Jane Doe was not possessing Austin or Tommy, so I'm like, does she even have that type of power? How did Emma even get to the basement? So now Austin and Tommy are sitting in the elevator. It's not working anyway. And Tommy starts explaining to us in subliminals what happened to his mom, but we really still don't know. I'm thinking it's maybe cancer or something. But he kept saying it was his fault. Bottom line, we still don't know what happened to his mom. So Austin starts thinking to himself, man, This thing hasn't killed us yet, so maybe it wants to figure out something. Because if it wanted us dead, we'd be dead. So now they're going to make their way back to the room. While this is going on, the Jane Doe turns on the firebox and lets the door open, releasing all types of fire and smoke. So now they're in a smoky basement trying to get back to this room, and then all of a sudden, all the coroner bodies popping up, whatever like that, and they keep attacking Tommy. And I'm thinking to myself, why are they attacking Tommy and not Austin? Why are they specifically targeting him? Nevertheless, Austin helps out his dad, and they finally get to the room. So they go back to work on her body right now. Everything is pretty much completely scarred. So they think to themselves, let's check the brain or whatever. Now the brain looks completely normal. So he cuts off a piece of the brain or whatever, like, puts it through the microscope, and he's like, what the fuck? Tommy looks through the microscope and you can see like organisms moving around or whatever like that, stating that she's actually still alive. How? Austin goes back and looks through the insignia, which is folded up, and then he looks and notices something. The fold-ins look, and it reads a word, Leviathus. So Tommy sees this and actually goes through the Bible, look up Leviticus, in a certain Roman numeral stating the chapters or whatever like that. Now, reading this information, basically is stating that she's a witch from the 1700s, yo. From up north in New England, where the type of peat dirt would have came from. So Tommy, like all of us, is thinking to ourselves, there's no way she could be from the fucking 1700s. He was explaining that all the girls in Salem or whatever like that, they would burn all these kids or whatever, or hang them or whatever like that. But here's the thing. She has no burn marks. She has no marks on her neck, considering that she was hung. They're trying to figure out if she actually is a witch. Next thing you know, all these dead bodies are supposed to be approaching the daggone door, which is locked. They're trying to keep the bodies out. And Tommy starts to convince himself to really believe this shit. So he's like, if you're going to take me, not my son. Next thing you know, all her blood starts going back into her body. Her body's all sewed up. Her eyes start going from gray to brown, indicating that she's getting color in her eyes. And basically, it looks like he's taking her dad's soul. Tommy's laying on the ground, pretty much looking like he's dying. His eyes start turning gray, and he looks over and sees a knife. And he motions to his son that the knife is over there. His wrist and his ankles start breaking up. And he forces Austin to get the knife and kill his own dad, yo. What the fuck? So after all this shit, he starts hearing people outside. He hears Sheriff Burke or whatever like that. He's like, Burke, hey, you guys in here? You guys in here? So he's trying to get in, realizing there's nothing but dead bodies in here. You know what I'm saying? Jane Doe, Tommy, Emma laying down. Thinking to himself, they're not going to believe I didn't do this shit. But nevertheless, he's still going to try to find a way out. He ends up going towards the doors, right, that he couldn't open at first. He's trying to push the doors open. He's telling them to keep pushing the doors. He can't push the doors. He's trying to get them out. And then he starts singing lyrics from the song that we kept hearing on the radio. We're like, oh, man. So is Austin's mind playing tricks on him or some shit? As he's up there on the steps, he turns around because he hears bells again. We're like, oh, no. He turns back around. He sees his father, Tommy, standing there, and his father just pushes him because he's so frightened. He pushes him through the banister, falls off the steps, and breaks his fucking neck. Austin's done deal dead as shit. Next day, it's all cleared up. Sheriff Burke and everybody goes through the corners or whatever like that, sees all the dead bodies. All of the bodies we thought was walking around was still sitting in these morgue spots, the same spots they were sitting at the beginning. They got all the bodies wrapped up, put them in the cars or whatever like that. He said, get this specific body out of my town. Fuck this. Last thing we see is this black dude driving a van or whatever like that. The van is containing the Jane Doe body. He's playing the radio. We hear that Sunshine song on the radio, and we see the body just laying there. Then all of a sudden, the bell goes off, yo. And that's the end of the movie. We're like, what the fuck? What kind of witch was she to be able to do all this? Did somebody do this to her, or did she do this to herself? Has she really been around since the 1700s? If so, why has she been a Jane Doe for this long? Who are these people, Pete and Carol and everybody else in the house that was able to bury her in the fucking basement? And again, how did Emma get to the basement with a freaking storm where all the doors are pretty much locked and the elevator was not working? So many questions. I think this movie came out around like 2016. The Autopsy of Jane Doe on Netflix. Check that shit out.